Welcome, True Believers. It's time for another great episode of the True Believer Show on the Fandom Podcast Network. And we got a lot to talk about. But first, I need to bring in my special co-host for this week. And he's special because he is doing his best to decipher the poop map. He is one, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
I'm about to do the Balky dance of joy, actually, if you guys get that little joke there. Little perfect strangers tie into this episode, Kyle.
Yeah, a lot of tie-ins to this episode. But Kevin, you know what? You have a quote that I think is quite appropriate that you pulled from the show. I think you should present to us before we get started.
More and more eccentric superhumans are coming out of the woodwork. We just started a Superhuman Law division, and I want to tell you all, well, the She-Hulk, to be the face of it.
What a face, too. Tatiana. Okay. First of all, how are you doing? You got the poop map figured out?
I do. You have to be careful, though, that when you go to the right poop bathroom, there's certain cubicles you don't want to go past while you do it. Sometimes you want to go around the outside of it, come around, because if you're heading to the poop bathroom, people that you pass will notice that, and they'll just look at you going, he's got to take a shit. So
yeah, I can completely understand that. We are learning about the true action of the MCU with this show, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the P corner on the Orville, but you know, there is certain bathrooms that are good for doing the pooping. But so,
well, again, we're welcoming all you wonderful viewers and listeners to the latest episode of True Believers, where we are covering everything that's happening in the MCU, which means we are covering all things She-Hulk, and it's getting fun, guys. Of course, too, before we even get into this episode, remember to join our Facebook True Believers group, where we keep you updated on all the happenings in the MCU. D23 is right around the corner, Kevin, and I expect we're going to have another big data drop of Marvel information. Probably not quite as big as San Diego Comic-Con, but I think our brains might still get a little bit overloaded.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. But hold on, Kyle. Don't get your hopes up.
I'm not getting my hopes up.
Get what we want, and let's temper our hopes here. Yes, it's D23, but let's temper them just a little bit, because I'm seeing a lot of that happening. We're getting our hopes up for things. We're expecting something completely different from this show, and there's a lot of butthurt out there because of the expectations. Just saying. Keep them down, keep them tempered.
Well, the way I look at it is I have hopes, but I have realism. So,
all right, just making sure. And this is everyone that's watching and listening. Temper your expectations. Keep an open mind.
Yeah,
pay attention to the story.
Yeah, but speaking of MCU news, we actually have a little bit of that. So it's time for Snit, Thwip, and Kapow. Let's get to some MCU news. You look like you have something you want to weigh in on, Mr. Reitzel.
I just want to remind you to do the spoiler warning alert when we actually start getting into stuff, just to remind people that we are spoilering this whole show again. So.
Oh yes, we will. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want any big rage monsters coming after me because I've spoiled something. So, a little bit of Fantastic Four news though, Kevin, because it looks like we might officially have a new director for Fantastic Four. The previous director had left, basically stating after his experience with it was Brad Bird who had done the Spider-Man movies. After his experience with Spider-Man, he was feeling a little burned out. Felt like he couldn't put his heart into it, so he stepped aside. The rumors are looking very strong that Matt Shakman is going to take over the helm of Fantastic Four. And what I find very interesting about this, Kevin, is, first of all, Matt Shakman, who was in line not only to direct Star Trek, but he's also in line to be directing some of the things that Apple Plus has planned for the future Monarch show that is going to be the Godzilla Kong show on Apple Plus. However, Matt Shakman is also familiar to many MCU fans because he directed WandaVision. And the reason why I think that's interesting, Kevin, is we have actually talked about this. There's a mention of certain astronauts possibly in WandaVision that many people speculated might be a mention of the Fantastic
4 astronauts. Yeah.
So maybe we got a little connection here after all, Kevin. I'm just reaching out there into the ether.
I like the connective tissue here. This is cool. So yeah.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying a little connective tissue in the ether there. That's all I'm throwing out there. But it is going to be fun to see what's going to happen with Fantastic Four. I do think, Kevin, that D23 Fantastic Four is going to be a centerpiece for the Marvel announcements. I truly do believe that. I think we might get some casting.
You think there's going to be a balance between Marvel and Star Wars?
I think there will be. I think there, because I think D23, if I'm not mistaken, is running 2 days this year. It's running the 9th and the 10th. I think the 9th is Marvel Day and the 10th is Star Wars Day.
Okay.
And then Disney projects within all of that. But I'm excited. It's going to be interesting to see. But you know what, guys? We are here to talk about what is happening currently in the MCU. And that means we're going to be talking about She-Hulk. So if you haven't watched the episode yet, that's right. We are going into full spoiler mode on She-Hulk, as Kevin said a little bit earlier in the episode. Go watch it, come back, rejoin us, whether you're watching our YouTube video or listening on our podcast. And we'll talk about all the joy that is She-Hulk. Mr. Reitzel, would you care to kick things off and give us a little bit of a rundown on what happened in this episode of She-Hulk?
All right, we're going to hit phase 1 here with our plot description and some first reactions, and we'll discuss the cast a little bit here as well. This is She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, Episode 2, Superhuman Law. Episode aired August 25th, 2022. In the aftermath of Titania's defeat, Walters gains notoriety as a new superhero dubbed She-Hulk by the public. Very funny scene with the news, by the way, when the guy's like, you mean She-Hulk? And the guy looks at the camera going, yeah. That was so funny. However, she is fired from the district attorney's office for losing the case. After several failed attempts at finding new work, Walters is offered a position by Holden Holloway of Goodman, Lieber, Kurtzberg, and Holloway, otherwise known as GLKNH, as head of the new Superhuman Law Division. Walters accepts on the condition that they also hire her best friend, Nikki Ramos, as her paralegal. On her first day, Walters learns that Holloway wants her to work as She-Hulk full-time. And her first case is to represent none other than Emil Blonsky for his parole. Through initially, by the way, that's the Abomination. Just to throw that out there. Yeah. So, though initially reluctant to take on the case due to Blonsky's past attempt to kill Banner, Walters agrees to meet with Blonsky in prison and hear his plea. She later contacts Banner, otherwise known as now Smart Hulk, and also receives his blessing to represent Blonsky, unaware that Banner is traveling in space in the Sakaran spaceship. Walters calls Holloway to accept the case, but she learns from the news report about a leaked footage of Blonsky participating in an underground fight club as the Abomination with Wong. To quote her, "Oh, this sucks." And then we get a cute post-credit scene. I'm assuming this took place after the family dinner. She helps her family doing some heavy lifting around the house.
Kevin, I got to ask you, I had a ton of fun with this episode. What were your first reactions to this episode?
Oh, so much fun, man. I am thoroughly enjoying this. I get the show, and it's what I was kind of hoping for, some fun, and that it's exceeded my expectations thus far, and that we're getting a different side of the MCU as opposed to the we are with all of the superheroes and the burdens that they carry, and the innocent people that have died because of this, and always having a target on their back. We're getting the us perspective, watching this on TV going, oh, wow, there's superhuman people out there, man. I mean, do they have a health plan? Do they get paid? We're getting these questions brought up, by Jennifer here, and seeing the news reports and just the legal side of this, and having this be a legal show allows us to not only see what the common person that's living among superhuman and superpowered people, we're also getting behind the scenes stuff that we won't see in normal superhero shows from a different perspective. Does that make sense?
Oh no, it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, totally refreshing was my point.
I also think because of that environment, it really does set it up well for the fourth wall breaking they do in this show as well.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, it's working. I like that it's not too much, like, when she's having the chat with Bruce and, says, oh no, that's fine. Man, I was a completely different person at that time, and then you see her look at the camera going, ha.
Yeah.
in a sarcastic way, which I thought was funny.
So one of the things too, Kevin, that I love about this, but it is also a little bit frustrating because I find this so fun and so refreshing. The episodes so far have flown by.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, the end of this episode hit, and I'm like, wait, what? We can't be done yet. It hasn't been 30 minutes. And I mean, and that's a good thing in that you're getting so lost in the fun of the episode, but it's also like you want more. And that's also a good thing in the aspect of, hey, you're going to come back and tune in next week. But I also love the little things they do. I love the fact when she goes in to see Blonsky for the first time, and the first word out of his mouth is "Namaste, Jennifer Walters."
Yeah,
going back to the first episode when she's doing that to Bruce.
Namaste, and holding your farts.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a poop map, so I must hold it. But it's all the little touches in this show, and we'll get to them as we get into more of the details of this episode itself. But I love it, and again, I come back to Tatiana as far as the energy she brings as Jennifer Walters. She's so relatable, and one of my favorite scenes is when she's first taking the job and she finds out she's got to do it as She-Hulk, and she's so upset, and she goes through this whole spiel talking to us as the listener and not hearing what her new boss is saying at all. And then it's like, well, you're okay with that, right? And she's just like all of a sudden like so it's those little touches in the show, and I think they're doing a very good job with these first two episodes out of the gate.
And it was nice to get the family dinner to kind of see what's happening on that side in a personal level. She's used to being one of the successful ones. And we get to meet some family members, which is interesting, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But the one that I did want to touch on is it was nice to see her dad, played by Mark Lynn Baker. Of course, more famous for people in the great 80s comedy Perfect Strangers. And he was, of course, it was an 80s version of like Odd Couple, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing him again, and that was a lot of fun. So did you ever watch Perfect Strangers?
Come on, cousin Kevin.
All right. I was trying to remember the country that Balky was from. Do you remember the country?
It was some made up country, and I can't.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But
Balky Bartakamus. Oh, I'm sorry. From the fictional island of Mipos.
Yes. But no, of course, it's always good to see Cousin Larry on the screen. I mean,
yeah, he was great.
No, Perfect Strangers was one of those ones that was in synchro. And when I was growing up in Alaska, it was in syndication a lot. We would do one of those shows we'd get in that like 7 to 8 o'clock before the primetime shows would start. So we get that in syndication quite a bit. But it's a very interesting cast. This week we meet a couple more new people, but I think the thing we got to talk about is the return of Tim Roth to
buddy, Tim Roth,
and he was great in this episode. He almost steals this episode completely.
He does. He's really familiar to us from the 90s, of course, being in several Tarantino films, and he's just a great character actor. But it's nice to see him come back, and I love how we have this natural transition of, yes, we don't have Edward Norton anymore, but that was the Hulk that we have now with, of course, our Bruce Banner, Mark Ruffalo, and tying it all together is Tim Roth. And I just loved how he felt he was a victim of circumstance, and that he, felt that he was going to be a Captain America type guy, and that he was doing a job, and he made a good argument.
Yeah. I do want to talk to you about Steve Coltner as Holden Holloway, who, of course, gave Jennifer her new job. And Kevin, here's the problem. He's a lawyer, so he's a corporate lawyer, so he already feels slimy. So is he just a slimy corporate lawyer, or could he be a villain in this show?
Okay, back up. Are you saying the actor is a real lawyer, or he?
No, the character of Steve Coulter as that character. I want to talk about that character. He's great in that. He's very fun in that role, and he's pulling off well. But we know he's a slimy corporate lawyer. Is he just a slimy corporate lawyer, or could he be a villain in this show?
I think it could lead to that way, and that would make an interesting dichotomy with her having to work for him and learn something nefarious going on. That would always be a good little, subplot to hopefully pop up. Yeah. So we'll see. But I'm curious though, because he's a no nonsense guy. He says he doesn't make jokes, but I hope that they keep to some other cases other than Emil Blonsky. I hope that there's other stuff that's happening that we see, but I have a feeling something weird's going to happen within the law firm.
Yeah, I think so too. We also Josh Segura makes his first appearance as Augustus Puglisi in this episode as well.
I'm sorry, who? Sorry,
Josh Segura.
Okay, and he's a character from the comics. I've heard, right?
Yeah, he's been in the comics, but I mean, if you're familiar with him, he was actually in Trainwreck, and he's got a little bit of comic book experience too. He played Adrian Chase / Prometheus in Arrow for 3 seasons.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that.
So he does have some comic book experience. And of course, it was great casting all the way around for Jennifer Walters' family. We're going to get into that here in a little bit. But Kevin, anybody else on the cast stand out for you for this episode?
That's about it for right now. There's a couple other things we'll mention later.
Okay. Well, I'm going to burn off a little gamma radiation here because, we do need to avoid those lethal doses. Okay, now I've taken care of that little bit of business, Kevin. What have our friends at Den of Geek been up to? What's Kristen Howard been up to these days?
Okay, so we've been there's a couple of writers there that we've been mentioning their work on several of our shows, not just here on True Believers, but also on Union Federation regarding Star Trek and of course the Orville. And we've mentioned Kristen Howard's name a lot, and she's been obviously been very busy, and she's been writing the She-Hulk ones. But as we found out last week, she was underwhelmed by the first episode of She-Hulk, and we also found out, because she let it slip, that she'd seen the first 4 episodes, which we had questioned whether or not we really take someone's instant reaction week by week for what it should be like we're doing after seeing more than 1 episode and seeing where it goes, and can you write objectively? With that said, though, I still want to represent her work here because she does write stuff well. And I do want to see her side of it as well and what she's getting at. And she goes on to say, our She-Hulk attorney at law reviews will be adapting a different format than the ones we use for MC shows with longer episodes. More of a breakdown, and we hope that you satisfy regular readers, but also for those with less familiar with the MCU. Keep up. With that in mind, let's take a look at Episode 2, Superhuman Law. What happened in the aftermath of Jennifer Walters' rather literal court battle with Titania? Is it Titania or Titania?
Titania.
Okay, I'm trying to remember that each time. And She-Hulk attorney at law, Episode 1. The media labeled her She-Hulk, a nickname she is very much not fond of, but Bruce Banner warned her, and he happens to like it as well. And of course we do. These superhero names. Cute. What's that?
I said it's kind of cute.
It is. And these superhero names have a way of sticking around. Jen's first client is none other than Emil Blonsky, a.k.a. Tim Roth, a.k.a. The Abomination, a.k.a. the villain from the weirdly and consistently in-canon Incredible Hulk movie starring Edward Norton as the Hulk. Jen will be running Emil's parole case as She-Hulk. So she pays him a visit in a maximum security jail where she is not allowed to be She-Hulk, which I guess for sure, why not? It gives the Marvel VFX team a break from trying to rapidly improve the CGI in this show. I am all for it. Now, Kyle, I know you got thoughts about this. This is what I want to talk about real quick. I'm going to get your thoughts in a second. I was listening to one of our shows that we listened to. I think it might have been the Ringerverse. And they were kind of talking about this, how it's not a secret that Disney Plus, Marvel, whatever, have cut corners. Maybe that's the wrong term to use when it comes to CGI, because either they don't have the staff or they have to use different staff, and they have a budget, just like every show does, every movie does. And if they get, and I believe it was the director and also the writer as well, was given direction saying, look, I need you to not have her be She-Hulk in these scenes because we need to cut the CG down. We don't have it in the budget for it. So the show's on a budget, guys. My opinion, be fine with it. Okay? Pay attention to the story and the acting. That's where your mind should go. So, Kyle, your thoughts? You wanted to say something.
See, the thing is the way it's worded in here, this actually makes sense if you read Marvel Comics. There is a high security prison where they keep villains, and Jen Walters has had to go there before, and they've told her, you can't go in as She-Hulk. We are not having a superhuman power contest happen in this prison.
Right.
And come on, there's actually a logic. It's a fairly logical thought when you think about it. The idea of putting two superpower people activating their superpowers in that kind of setting is going to lead to possible disaster. So, as don't poke the bear, as they say.
As you know, I got on my soapbox last week about people bitching about CG in general, and I gave my reasons for it. And the lazy excuse now is it takes me out of the story. I'm sorry. If CGI that's not, movie quality takes you out of the story, you're not trying hard enough. I'm sorry. You're not. And I don't accept that. That is a lazy excuse. Like I said, I can enjoy this if they were sock puppets, because I think the story's good and Tatiana Maslany is great. They don't make her, Avengers movie worthy looking good. I'm okay with that because she is awesome and they got a great cast. So stop your lazy bitching. Okay. But I did want to point out that this obviously is bugging Kristen Howard, the writer of this article. I don't know if she's letting it get to her like a lot of people are. And I get it. I just disagree with the approach. And I'm trying to give you guys another way of looking at this, that this is television effects that are on a budget. And you got to get happy with that and be happy with that and move up past it.
And Kevin, I'm going to go back to the same point I always make with these comic book movies. The actors, it's the actors. They want to make sure their own face gets shown too. That's why you don't see them wearing the masks all the time or in the CGI all the time.
Yeah, true. But also too, we become, and I say we because a lot of our peers have become hypercritical when it comes to CG, especially with the Star Wars shows. We saw it with Obi-Wan. We saw it even with Doctor Strange. And, it's like you have something else to critique. It's going past me when you complain about CGI. I'm sorry. Just like my personal opinion. That's my soapbox.
Yeah. And like I said, my point is here too, is that they actually worked it into the story in an intelligent way to not have the CGI. So exactly. What are we complaining about?
Yeah. So she goes on to say, Emil explains that he was a victim of circumstance and how and now reformed, choosing to not become the Abomination after having found inner peace and 7 new soulmates. I'm taking a pause quick, Kyle, because I need to write that down and ask you about that later. Okay, where was I here? Soulmates, yeah. Okay. So, who he met through the prison pen pal program. Jen decides to take his case, but things seem immediately fall apart when the Abomination is seen fighting in an underground fight club, having escaped from a cell. So I like how Kristen is kind of having, taking these articles with She-Hulk from a legal point of view, like the case and all this kind of stuff. And now she has the verdict section. Any good? She says, it came to light before the premiere that last week's episode, A Normal Amount of Rage, was in fact supposed to be the penultimate episode. That always means the second to last in this series. But there was some fear that the audiences wouldn't wait that long to find out She-Hulk's origin story. She says, Kristen Howard, I disagree and found Superhuman Law to be much better introduction to Jen last week, or to Jen. Last week, we all knew about we all knew about her was that she was a lawyer, Bruce's cousin, and a Hulk. This week, we got to spend time with Jen and her circle, which felt like a better place to start properly caring about her character. Kyle, do you agree or disagree with Kristen? Do you think that they should have started with this one, waited for her originally planned second to last episode to show her origin, or do you like the way they did it?
As it stands now, I like the way they did it because it got that out of the way. We got it. We got the story. We got the base. So we could move forward and get into this without interrupting and looking at flashbacks of the origin story or anything like that. The only question I will have is, as we get later in the show to where that episode should have been the penultimate episode, where does it fall into the show? How, was it something that it would have made sense in that spot? But for right now, as we're looking at the show as is, it set the groundwork, which is what we needed, and it gets that out of the way so it's not a hanging plot line for the rest of the show.
This is where I think her seeing 4 episodes at once kind of skews her idea on this. And maybe the next 2 episodes might give us a reason why she feels that way. Maybe not. But I agree with you too. I like getting the origin stuff done and out of the way. And I thought it was a smart thing to do. And the way they did it with breaking the fourth wall. And she started out saying, yes, I'm a Hulk. And, for you guys to take this lawyer show seriously, let's show you the reason why. I thought just being upfront about it was great. And now we start getting into her actually being part of the Superhuman Law division. I can disagree with her, and I agree with you, Kyle. I like the way things went. Kristen Howard goes on to say, the episode itself is fine enough and fairly entertaining and works best with Tatiana Maslany. Tatiana Maslany is in Jen form and able to fully emote. Maslany is a terrific actress, and last week there was just too much CGI for her to really show that off. She does a good job of keeping the wild story grounded here, and you really feel for Jen as she quickly loses her grip on her own identity. This is where I kind of disagree with Kristen as well, because yes, I like the moments, but I think it's of her not being in Hulk form, but it's really important for her to be in Hulk form. And there is some moments there that I found very, very entertaining, Kyle. And I thought they did a good balance of it, showing Tatiana as Jen without the form, and the fact that she can go from, both without having any issues like, Banner did, I think was good. And there was some moments with her as She-Hulk because she's still insecure as She-Hulk. And I think that's important to see. What about you? I felt the balance was good. Yourself?
I found the balance was great. And this is where I'm finding myself a little frustrated with Kristen Howard and how she's writing this on the show with seeing 4 episodes, because Kevin, in this very article, she's talking out of both sides of her mouth. She was just complaining about the fact that she had to change back to Jennifer Walters to go into the prison because of cutting back on the CG. But here she's like, no, it's better when she's not in the CG. You can't have it both ways. They're playing a great game. What they're doing is, I think they're getting a good balance of, you see her as She-Hulk and you're seeing her as Jen. So it helps us learn more about Jen by seeing her as Jen, seeing how she emotes and everything like that. So when she is She-Hulk, we have a better understanding of her emotional base.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing a very good balanced job with it. And I think that when they use Jen in She-Hulk form so far, it hasn't been overdone, and it complements the character. I think right now they're playing a great job of complementing human Jen and She-Hulk Jen.
Yeah. She goes on to critique a little bit in the shuffling of the episodes and stuff like that. But she did give this a rating 3 out of 5. The first episode, she gave it a 2.5 out of 5. So that is any other reactions to the article, Kyle?
I'm really going to be curious to see how she starts taking this show once we get past the 4th episode and she's seeing stuff at the same time we are.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm trying not to throw her under the bus, but it is a little frustrating.
Well, there might be people that feel the same way that she does.
Yeah.
You and I are on the same boat, and it's okay if people disagree, but I did not want to say, I don't want to include her articles just because we disagree with them. And I don't think that's fair, because she's done such wonderful work that we do agree with. And I think it's important to be objective and show different sides to a point.
Oh no, I completely agree, and I welcome it. But what like I said, one of the things that's just a little bit frustrating and so far in this, especially in this article, was she's one minute she's saying this is a bad thing, the other minute she's not, and so make up my mind a little bit. And again, Kevin, like I said, I think there's a little bit of biasy because she's seen those first 4 episodes, and it does change your writing style, whether you mean to or not. But I gotta let Kevin, the Tesseract's acting up. I'm gonna let off a little bit more Tesseract energy here, and then I think you have some trivia for us.
All right, as I joked about earlier, Kyle, our first bit of trivia where Bruce Banner, Mark Ruffalo, says he was a different person when he last fought Emil Blonsky, and the fight occurred in Incredible Hulk 2008, where Banner really was a different person, being played by Edward Norton, who Ruffalo later succeeded.
Kevin, I just got to say, the Marvel MCU Reclamation Tour continues in She-Hulk.
Reclamation Tour?
As they take those movies that people say, I'm not, giving them reclamation, redemption. They're doing it with Hulk right now. They're Incredible Hulk right now. They're having some fun with it. They're making it fun.
Or they're just doing a good job with connecting all of these films. But they do seem to be targeting some troubled movies. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Jennifer Phone's lock screen is a picture of Captain America's butt, continuing a running gag from the previous episode.
Come on. It is America's ass. I mean, let's be honest here.
It is. Yeah. Very, very funny. Jennifer is hired by the GLK&H firm. The letters stand for Goodman, Liebert, Kurtzman, and Holloway. The first 3 names refer to the Marvel Comics founders, publisher Martin Goodman, and writer and artist Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who were born Liebert and Kurtzman. Very cool. I love when they do that. Love when they show those
little tributes in.
The scene of the guard giving the rules to Jennifer for her audience with Blonsky is very similar to the scene in 1991 Silence of the Lambs when Clarice first visits Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Jennifer also makes a reference, more of a joke, to the fava beans and Chianti dialogue made by Lecter in the movie, and the guy said, "This is a lady prison." Or, "This is a prison lady," and I kind of get this. You don't make those jokes at prisons like you don't talk about bombs going through TSA,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The exterior and some interiors for GLK&H's offices are the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, which also was used as an exterior for the prison where Hannibal Lecter was held in Michael Mann's Manhunter, which adds a slight extra twist to Jen's fava beans and the nice Chianti joke later in the episode. See, it's all this tying together, Kyle. It's awesome. And a news website that Jennifer visits has 2 headlines. Why there's a giant statue of a man sticking out of an ocean. This refers to the events of Eternals 2021, where the celestial being Tiamat, am I pronouncing that right, Kyle?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Emerged from the ocean. Also, quote, man fights with metal claws in a bar brawl. This refers to the metal clawed mutant Wolverine, who debuted in the Hulk comics in 1974 as an adversary. He later appeared in the X-Men comics 1975. Kyle, they are laying the groundworks for the big M word, just like Miss Marvel did at the last episode.
They're having some fun, but Kevin, you know what? I'm looking at this paper here. We've got a picture of it in our notes. I'm more worried about all the secret heads who are not getting their Iron Man 3s.
I'm sorry?
I'm worried about all the sneaker heads. It's the sneaker collectors out there. Yeah, you got an ad right there for Iron Man 3s. Where can I get me some Iron Man 3s? Right above man fights with metal claws.
Oh, Iron Man 3s. I didn't even see that. You're referring to the tennis shoe, the sneakers. Yes, the sneaker heads. Okay, cool. Iron Man 3.
I'm willing to bet you Harley has a pair of Iron Man 3s.
This is true. Yes, not Harley Quinn, but the heir apparent to Iron Man, the kid star Harley from Iron Man 3. Nice. I love this. Otherwise, Swiss Village mascot, we could do that maybe. Or she's looking at that anyway. I love that. I think that's great. Yeah. Mutants, Kyle, they're laying the groundwork. It's only a matter of time.
Slowly but surely.
A matter of time. I love it. The final scene includes a news item about Emil Blonsky appearing in an underground fight club as the Abomination. This had happened in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at the Fight Club in Macau. We were wondering when we saw the Abomination how this was going to tie in to the MCU, Kyle, and it has.
Oh, it has, and in some beautiful ways. And I this is the MCU doing what it does best. This is them putting in those little connections. It doesn't. Sometimes you don't need those big, overtly massive connections. Those little connections, those little fun things that they do, and it slowly builds the world around you without having this blatant thing happen. And it's something the MCU does so well, and I love it.
Yeah. Like the first episode, there's another barcode that leads to a free She-Hulk comic on the website for 10 offbeat jobs for a fresh start. And in this episode, when Jen is offered by the very lawyer who got her fired, but only if she will appear as Hulk, in her She-Hulk form. In the comics, the GLK and H do hire Jen, but only if she appears as Jen rather than the She-Hulk. So they kind of twisted that around a little bit, Kyle.
Yeah, they're having a little fun with it. It's interesting, but I like I said, they're enjoying what they're doing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the things they're doing with comparison to the comics here in a little bit. So we got some more to talk about with that.
Okay. I think we've said enough trivia here. So Kyle, so what we got next?
Right now we're going to tell everybody what else is happening around the Fandom Podcast Network, because we got some very fun things happening. So sit back, relax. Don't just get your namaste on. And here's what's going on around the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Bloody Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And we're back. Nobody's broken out in a rage. Everybody's still got their calm on. Namaste to you, Mr. Reitzel.
Namaste.
Tatiana. Continuing on, Mr. Reitzel, do you have some Easter eggs for us?
Yeah, Kristen Howard did bring out some Easter eggs, and I just wanted to mention this. I think we've touched on a couple of these here. And she mentions, of course, Emil Blonsky is the standout. We've only revisited Abomination once since The Incredible Hulk, and that, of course, when we saw him fighting in Shang-Chi. We also know that the show takes place in the MCU timeline. This isn't the last we'll see of Abomination. He's also set up to pop up in the upcoming Disney Plus animated series, Marvel Zombies, though we can probably assume that will be a multiverse variant of the character. Now, will we see a zombie version of Abomination, or will we see someone that can namaste himself?
It'll be interesting. It'll be animated, but it'll be interesting.
Kyle, we may have brought this up, and maybe some of this has been answered already regarding the Hawkeye TV series. Jen's dad is preoccupied with Hawkeye's arrows and is asking the hard questions about what happens to those dangerous weapons after Clint has fired them. We will probably never know the answer, and that's fine with me, Kristen says. These aren't the kind of things that keep me up at night.
We know Kate Bishop rounds them all up.
Yeah, I mean, come on. They're fun, right? Anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going into topic number 1 here.
Okay. So topic number 1, you've got timeline discussion. Shang-Chi.
Yeah. So is this soon after Shang-Chi here? I mean, Shang-Chi, is what I should say.
Shang-Chi. Well, let's go right to the source. Head writer Jessica Gao, speaking to TV Line, confirmed that She-Hulk is set soon after Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It's not like years later, she said. It's a relatively short amount of time, but you got to figure if they were getting the footage leaked out of the Fight Club with Wong and the Abomination. So, Kevin, I do have a thought about this. I want your opinion. We know Wong is making an appearance in She-Hulk.
Yes.
Is next? Do we think we're seeing Wong pretty shortly here?
I would assume so, now that we have found out that the Abomination made this appearance, and we know everyone should know who Wong is because he's an Avenger, and he's hanging out down there in New York, you know, and stuff like that. So yeah, he'll probably be either requested to come in or subpoenaed.
Well, I mean, he
have to understand that yes, there are books that you may follow and have to be careful of, but there's also this other book called Law.
Yeah. But as I have stated here on many of our episodes, Wong, yes, might be the current Sorcerer Supreme of the MCU, but more importantly, he is the Phil Coulson of this of the MCU currently. He is the man that's appearing everywhere and tying it all together.
Yes, which I love. We almost don't need his own show because he's showing up in everyone else's, which is great. I love that. I love that.
Everything from Wong's perspective.
Yeah. Who's the FBI guy that was an Ant-Man and then jumped over to WandaVision?
Jimmy Woo.
Yeah, I need more of him. Let's bring him back. This would be great. Another topic I got here: the episode ties to the MCU and the comics. We've discussed that a little bit here. By the way, real quick, Kyle, Yusef, this guy that is mentioned during the dinner discussion that Jennifer thinks his mom is trying to set her up with, but he says, no, he's much too young for you. But he wants to become a superhero or something like that. So I gave him your number. Who's Yusef? Has there been any reference to this guy?
There's not been any references to a Yusef that I am aware of. Let me put it that way. The name Yusef does not ring a bell to me.
Okay.
So,
all right. So
I'll give him your number, Kevin, though. I know you've got some great superheroing advice for him. Because you are a hero. You're a great You are a hero on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Okay. I don't know if advice. I'm kind of putting me on the spot here, but I'll come up with something. I always do.
I'm just trying to give a man a compliment, tell him what a great job he does. So.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So let's have a little discussion about a couple things. Of course, Hawkeye's bow and quiver was mentioned. That's always been kind of something. I think that was an in-joke with probably comic readers like yourself, Kyle. Like, what happens to these things? How does it get them? The super soldier serum is brought up again. This was a version that they had in the Hulk film that didn't work out too well with Blonsky. Did you have any thoughts on that, though?
I actually really like that they brought that up, but I also really like the fact that Blonsky brings that up as part of the reason of fault. He doesn't talk about all the stuff he did with the other scientists to boost him up even more.
Yeah, there was some nice cocktails he was putting up there.
Yeah. There's some extra gamma going on in there that, All
right.
Just saying.
So they decided to make a reference to Eternals. Was this done on purpose to either bring more attention to that film, or are they going to tie something else in the MCU and is going to make people to have to want to volunteer to watch that movie.
I don't think you have to worry about it at this point, Kevin. I think this is one of those things that people have been saying since Eternals ended. Is like, why is nobody talking about the big statue of this big thing that's just appeared after the end of the Eternals? And I think they're using She-Hulk as their way to have a little fun and mention some of these things that people are going like, what?
Okay.
What's that? So I don't think it's any more than that. I don't think you have to worry about anything with Eternals until you see Harry Styles pop up again in our MCU.
Okay. Goodman, Lieber, Kurtzman, and Holloway. What are they in the comics, if any?
They're a high-powered law firm that Jennifer Walters at a time worked for. I don't believe she's working for them anymore. But when the Dan Slott's She-Hulk run, which is a lot of what this is based off of, she was working for them during that run. So, and there's 2 runs of She-Hulk that are considered like the big defining runs. It's the John Byrne Sensational She-Hulk run, and then this Dan Slott She-Hulk run that was fairly recent, just a couple of years ago.
Was it Holloway? What did Holloway say when she was getting ready to get the information regarding Blonsky? He's like, make sure you send so-and-so to somewhere because he doesn't like the cold, but tell him that.
Yeah. Send him to Minnesota. He doesn't like that's just Holloway. He's just a cutthroat, slimy corporate lawyer.
If you get on his bad side, he's going to let you know.
Yeah.
So the Department of Damage Control is back up again, Kyle. It's mentioned here. Has there been any nefarious things regarding the damage control that we might have to look forward to, do you think, with She-Hulk? Because we got kind of a side of that with Miss Marvel. A little bit of kind of a negative side to it. And then there was the good guy in there, and he pulled the people back to mess around with Miss Marvel and her neighborhood. How do you think that's going to come into play, if any? Are they going to be clients? What's going on?
I think damage control could be a client. I also wouldn't be surprised. There's a side of damage control we really haven't seen. One of the sides of damage control is going in and doing the repairs after one of these big superhero battles. And if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong because it's been a while since I've read the damage control miniseries, She-Hulk was in an episode, and there was a guy who's kind of like the foreman of damage control for the construction side, and she kind of was flirting with him and having a little fun with him and stuff like that. So they could maybe play that up a little bit, because that would be an interesting way to bring in and see another side of what we are seeing with how they're incorporating damage control as a bigger and bigger part in the MCU.
It also seems that in the MCU, and let's remind people that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We just kind of throw MCU out and we forget actually what it means. That no, we're not going to copy your comics word for word. We're going to use it as kind of inspiration. And I know you want to talk about that a little bit more. But according to the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki here, damage control also specializes in cleaning up the post-battle damage caused by agents. And also, damage control was made into an executive branch of the United States government in 2012, and a joint venture with Stark Industries was tasked with collecting powerful and alien technology. And according to this wiki as well, by 2024, which now is current MCU time, so they kind of always like a couple of years ahead of us here, the Department of Damage Control had transitioned into a federal law enforcement agency tasked with apprehending enhanced individuals along with seizing dangerous and alien artifacts. And if I'm getting my balls all in a row here, we saw a taste of that in Spider-Man and then come to full force in Miss Marvel, right?
Yeah, you saw the transition where in Spider-Man Homecoming, where they kind of helped create the Vulture by taking Michael Keaton's company and basically shutting it down.
But I'm more talking about the law enforcement side of it.
Yeah,
because we saw that happen with the last Spider-Man Far From Home a lot. I'm sorry. No Way Home. Sorry.
No Way Home. We saw it there, and then obviously more with Miss Marvel. And I can easily see it where we see more of that with She-Hulk, because we are going to start seeing some of the more oddball Marvel villains. It's kind of like the B and C list villains here come up. And I can see where these guys might have been taken down by damage control here. Yeah. So I want to have the Hulk discussion of what's going to be happening with him at the end here, Kyle. Just a couple of things I want to mention. We finally get who is Ched, the other genius in the family. We have that answer now.
I think when Banner said that, he was being sarcastic, and we found out that's the case. But hey, he's got a job, and he just got promoted manager at Best Buy, which I find interesting that in 2024, Best Buy is still around. Because if you look at the shelves lately, you're kind of wondering, like, okay.
Well, people still need TVs. I mean, and somebody's got to tell us what 4K is. It might just not be Ched. It just might not be Ched.
and can we just say maybe from now going forward, if you are welcoming someone into as a new job position and there is more bathrooms, Kyle, please let them know the best one to poop at. So,
Kevin, I got to be honest with you. From inside jokes Kevin and I thought about you instantly when that came up.
Kyle, just so you know, I thought about you instantly when that came up as well. So we're on the same thing here. I mean, how many times when we're getting ready to podcast, we're like, hold on, poop emoji pops up in our message. We know what's happening. So yeah,
exactly. The importance
TMI, I know, but come on, guys, this is how we roll. Before I mention the Hulk stuff, Kyle, you mentioned there was a topic or two you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the fact that there's a thing happening in the Marvel universe. And when we first started True Believers, we had a lot more to compare to the comics. And this is something Kevin Feige has talked about in several recent interviews, to where the MCU is becoming its own thing. Yes, we are still using the comics for source material and some guidelines, but we're able to we're at the point with the MCU where we can build within our own universe. And that is what we're starting to see happen. And I think a lot of Phase 4 was like this. And I think a lot of what we're seeing now was like Moon Knight and She-Hulk and some of the other upcoming projects. We're starting to see them build upon their own universe with just taking ideas and developing ideas from the comics, not following the comics as close as they did in the earlier phases when they really had to sell these characters and get people familiar with them and keep them familiar with it. Now you're seeing where they're introducing characters, changing them a little bit, maybe making them a little bit more movie friendly, TV friendly, and how they translate. But Kevin, it's just part of this grand experiment that is the MCU, where it's evolved to a point now where it really is its own thing. Yes, they can pull from some of these comic storylines. You're going to always continue to do that, but they can tell them in their own way now. And I think as long as they stay true to those basic fundamentals of a story, especially some of the bigger stories, they'll keep the fans happy. But I think the fans do need to realize the MCU is becoming its own life form per se.
Right. Yeah.
And
gotcha. Yeah.
Understand that.
And this is something that has been kind of a pet peeve of mine with my wife, Erin, is that there's some things that's happening in some of the stories that, we want to be able to enjoy without having to go read thousands of comic books to get everything. And we shouldn't have to do that. And the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, shouldn't have to appease every comic book loyal person that is expecting something to go a certain way and be upset about it because they're pulling from that for inspiration. But it needs to be its own machine and its own thing and its own world, like you just said, Kyle. And I just wanted to reiterate that because for us non-comic book readers, it's important to be able to enjoy this aspect of it creating its own identity without having to know every single thing from the comics. That's why I personally go to Kyle while we do these shows. But I don't want to feel I don't want shade thrown on me because, oh, you haven't read the comics, well, you should have read the comics. I'm not going to fly that way, and I'm not going to respect your opinion if you throw that in my face.
Yeah, I will tell anybody, if you want to know more, read the comics.
Yeah.
But like I said, what I like is the fact that the MCU is the cinematic universe has grown to this point after the Infinity Saga to where they can start telling the stories in their own way. And I think that's what's so fascinating. But I also think maybe, Kevin, that was also why some people had some issues with Phase 4, is because they were starting to grow this, telling it in our own way. So I'm curious to see how this is going to play out over the future next couple of phases. But I'm liking the chances they're taking, and I'm enjoying what they're doing. And I think people just need to take a deep breath and just enjoy what's going on.
Agreed. Well said. Last thing I want to touch on is Hulk, aka Smart Hulk, current Hulk. Let's just put it that way. By the way, back to the whole thing about Kristen not liking how the Danny Geek writer not liking how they did make the change and throw in the backstory. I personally like the fact. The other point I wanted to make was I like the fact that we got to see the connection with Banner right away, and I think that was important to bring this new hero into it with someone who's very familiar with us, and I think that was vital, and that was one of the main reasons why they did that. With that said, Kyle, she goes on to say, we also say goodbye to Bruce Banner in this episode. A Sicarian ship is seen flying him into space. But the reason for this journey will stay a mystery for now. If I had to guess, it would be that he fathered a child during his stretch on Sakaar, and that an MCU introduction to his son Scar is in the wind. This did happen in the comics, and while Marvel Studios don't always follow those storylines accurately, sorry, that kind of bugged me, it would be another good out for Mark Ruffalo as if he ever decided he'd had enough of playing the Hulk, which is a good point. I personally think, Kyle, that this is a great way to keep him playing the Hulk, because as we learned from a recent podcast that really dove into, what was the name of the podcast again? I want to give it a shout out. The Town. Yes. Where they talked about where the rights of the Hulk are right now, why we can't have a Hulk movie put on by Disney, because Universal holds the rights and saying if you're going to have Hulk in a movie, he has to co-star in it. But you can't have a Hulk standalone. But nothing is said about a TV series, which is what they might do here and what we're kind of getting going on here. Also, the fact that he might have a child, Kyle, would lead really cool into now that Thor has a child. And we've had all these young people that could lend to the future of the Avengers and the West Coast Avengers or whatever they're going to do with him. I think is very, very cool. But Kyle, what the heck do you think he's doing on a Sicarian ship? Where's he going? What's happening? I want your opinion.
Okay, now I talked a bit about this last week about how genius I think Kevin Feige is of what he's doing. I truly do believe he is setting up a World War Hulk TV show. And that spins out of some of this. They're going to take elements of Planet Hulk that they started with in Thor Ragnarok, and expand on them with this show and lead us back to the Hulk coming back to Earth in a World War Hulk. Add to that, Mark Ruffalo has been making some noise this week talking about, we might not have seen the last of the Savage Hulk yet. We got World War Hulk possibilities, Planet Hulk possibilities, anything's possible.
I need 30 seconds of what is World War Hulk.
World War Hulk was the follow-up to Planet Hulk. And in Planet Hulk, what basically happens is the Illuminati of the MCU, in this case, they send Hulk off to a faraway planet. Get him off Earth. He's a danger. Because he goes to this planet Hulk, basically liberates the planet, falls in love, has a son with this woman who gets killed, with this alien woman who gets killed. He gets a ship, he comes back to Earth, and he's looking for revenge for the heroes that sent him to this planet.
The Illuminati.
And so
it's World War Hulk.
Yeah. World War Hulk in the comics is that storyline where he's back on Earth. His son is with him. They're trying to take him out. And obviously to get the Hulk calmed down, eventually he realizes the errors of his ways. But still, obviously, World War Hulk's going to be much different in the MCU, but I think it's still going to be very interesting.
Do you think they're tying in this character Scar, which is his son? Do you think that's going to happen?
I think that's let me put it this way. I would say I'm 90% confident that that's going to happen. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm about 95% confident that World War Hulk is going to be one of the D23 announcements.
Ooh. That's a big, bold statement there. Interesting. Okay, well, I'm fine with more Hulks. Let's bring in more Hulks in the MCU. I'm loving Hulks, and I love that we're getting, smart Hulk here a little bit in She-Hulk, and I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, speaking of energy and Hulks and everything like that, I got to burn off just a little bit more Tesseract energy here, Kevin. It's time for Phase 4, Mr. Reitzel. Time to talk about next week's episode and what our predictions are. Do you have any thoughts? What we might see in next? What court case is coming up for Jen Walters?
I think it's important for this show to not only deal with the main court case with Blonsky, but I would love to see some other side cases happening with her colleagues. I think that would be fascinating. Throw out some other characters. I think it's too soon for Matt Murdock, but I would like to see something else. I think Wong is definitely going to come into next week's episode. It has to. I mean, when you lead into it right away. So that's what I'm thinking. I think we're going to get the Wong side of this and figure out, how that's going to work. Can I just be perfectly honest here, Kyle? I'm a guy. She-Hulk's hot. Mm-hmm. Tatiana Maslany as She-Hulk.
Do not speak ill of my future wife.
I am not speaking ill of her. She's hot.
Yeah.
And what's great is that she's hot in Jennifer Walters form and in She-Hulk form, and I love that they have that balance. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking with it.
I'm waiting for when Kevin finally watches Orphan Black and he gets an opinion of all the different clones of Tatiana Maslany. I'm interested in which version he likes her. As far as my predictions for next week, Kevin, I'm going to go with a little bit of, I think this Blonsky storyline is going to maybe be something that runs through maybe the rest of the season with She-Hulk. But it's like a case she's working on, but she's going to start working on other cases. And some of these episodes are going to be these other cases. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Wong episode next week, but I could see it playing down in maybe a couple more episodes. It's just a matter of how they're going to play this Abomination storyline, because it could be where there's a confrontation between Abomination and She-Hulk at the end of this. But I'm going to be bold. I have one prediction that's not for next week's episode, but for this show, Kevin. A certain Countess, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, will be making an appearance in She-Hulk before this is all said and done.
Say her name.
I can't. Countess.
And she works for who?
Supposedly she works for S.H.I.E.L.D., but she's probably. Let me just put it this way: she's recruiting some Thunderbolts.
Okay, is this the soulmates that he's referring to? The 7 soulmates?
There are rumors that might be who he's referring to. The writer has debunked that though, but we know again.
So who are the 7? Who are the 7 soulmates, Kyle? Who are they?
We don't know.
Come on.
Let me say. Come on. No, I have a feeling they're at least tied into the Thunderbolts somehow, because even though the writer might say that's not, everybody plays by the Andrew Garfield playbook now. They lie.
Okay. That was the last thing I wanted to bring up. So,
yeah,
okay, cool.
I wouldn't be surprised if these soulmates are at least a couple of the Thunderbolts members.
Okay.
So all right. We'll see how that plays out, but I'm excited. I'm ready to go to court. Tatiana's waiting for me, Kevin. You don't keep the big green girl waiting.
I would love it. Now that we know that there's space, Thor's from space, Guardians of the Galaxy space, people know the Hulk has gone to space. I want to see people like Blonsky or whatever, even normal people saying, how do I get to space? How do I get to these worlds that we are now learning about? Because let's be honest, Kyle, in reality, the only thing we can really talk about is Mars and the moon. Imagine being these everyday people going with the technology that's out there, the superheroes that's out there, and the way they're able to move around. Please take me to Sakaar. Take me to whatever these other planets that we've been with. Just saying.
Let me put a call into Rocket, see what I can do for you, man. You are building up some Excelsior points. I'm just saying. With that, guys, we got one more piece of Tesseract energy to burn off. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of True Believers, or watching it on our YouTube channel. Of course, if you're watching it on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe. Tell all the people about our wonderful Fandom Podcast YouTube channel. Of course, if you're listening on the podcast version of it, you're either listening to it on Podbean on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com, or you're listening to it on one of the many different podcast catchers that are out there, whether it's iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or one of many others. We thank you so much for listening. You can contact us. Of course, we talked about at the top of the show, the True Believers Fandom Podcast Network page or the main Fandom Podcast Network page, where we keep you updated on all the goings on in fandom. If you want to contact us directly, you can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Fandom Podcast Network, or on Twitter at FanPod Network. You can follow me, Kyle, on Twitter at AKyleW, or on Instagram at Tatiana Will You Marry Me, or at AKyleFandom. Kevin, where can people find you on the social media?
Of course, you can find me in the True Believers Facebook group, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix.
And of course, too, you can visit tpublic.com, find all the gear of the Fandom Podcast Network, including True Believers gear. Just type in Fandom Podcast Network or the name of your favorite show on the Fandom Podcast Network. We'd love to get your input too, whether it's on iTunes, Spotify, any of these great podcasters. Leave us a review. We'd like to know how we're doing and what we can do to improve things for you in your listening experience. I want to thank you, Kevin, for joining me. Keep the poop map safe. I'm leaving it in your hands.
I've got that on my phone. I can text it to anyone that needs it.
He's building an app. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be an app poop map for every building in the world. But
if there's a website that can tell you the perfect time to pee during the movie, there has to be a poop one.
Yeah, exactly. But again, thank you to all you Marvel fans out there for listening to us. Until next time, as always, Excelsior, and make ours Marvel.